One of the most popular and endearing series by Cartoon Network involves a trio of young girls with impressive superpowered abilities. I'm of course referring to the Powerpuff Girls, Blossom, Bubbles, and Buttercup. Created by Craig McCracken, these characters displayed plenty of charm and spunk as they stopped all sorts of villains and tried to save the City of Townsville. McCracken first devised the characters when he was in animation school, finding the visual idea of little girls beating up ferocious monsters to be amusing, and created a short featuring them. Although in that short, titled A Sticky Situation, they were referred to as the Whoop-Ass Girls. While it's common for animated characters to go through major changes as the creators and artists continued to tweak them, McCracken already established the familiar aspects of the show in his student film. They were always named Blossom, Bubbles, and Buttercup, and the show's intro that explains how Professor Utonium created the girls is told almost verbatim in the original short. He mixes sugar, spice, and everything in ice, accidentally spills a special chemical into the concoction, and then out come the girls with superpowers and looking similar to the big-eyed children from Margaret Keane paintings. They head off to fight crime in the City of Townsville, specifically the Amoeba Boys and the Gangrene Gang, who would later appear as part of their rogues gallery in the series. This short caught the attention of the people at Cartoon Network, which led to McCracken creating 2 new shorts featuring the girls for the What a Cartoon Show. Unsurprisingly, the network asked him to change the name, so they became the Powerpuff Girls instead. Following the airing of the shorts, the Powerpuff Girls was picked up for a series which premiered in 1998. From the beginning, McCracken already established the 3 girls and what made each one stand out, with Blossom as the confident leader, Bubbles as the caring and optimistic one, and Buttercup the one often ready to beat villains to a pulp. This was further helped by their voice actors, who gave the characters some additional personality. Kathy Caffadini as Blossom, Tara Strong as Bubbles, and E.G. Daly as Buttercup were perfectly cast in those roles, imbuing them with the needed spirit and likability. They also have a sweet relationship with the professor, often encouraging him with his inventions. The series showed how they worked together, but also the occasional disagreements they had, whether dealing with a foe or playing around at home. They did have their flaws, like Buttercup maybe getting too aggressive at times, or Blossom thinking a little much about herself. However, when it came time to defeat the villains, they were able to work together to find the best strategy to stop them. Although that strategy usually came down to beating them up. That was one of the things that made Powerpuff Girls stand out, as it was a show with these girls with a seemingly sweet-natured appearance, who also pulverized the baddies in incredibly harmful ways. This show was violent, but not in a way that went too overboard. Their designs also left an impression. Them having these big eyes and no fingers could have resulted in something unnerving, but it instead worked, with McCracken explaining he just did not think they looked right with fingers. He really wanted the series to appeal to a general audience, and I think he succeeded, thanks to the clever humor and the stories he and his fellow writers came up with. They populated Townsville with a memorable assortment of characters like the childish mayor, and even a talking dog who would sometimes pop up. The villains were also an interesting bunch, the best being the girls' chief nemesis Mojo Jojo. Usually prone to launching into lengthy rants, he was a hilarious villain, and some of the best episodes usually involved the girls going up against him. You also had the devilish him, the spoiled brat Princess Morebucks, the gun-toting Fuzzy Lumpkins, and the girls' evil counterparts, the Rowdy Rough Boys. They each had their own specific motivations for going up against the Powerpuff Girls, and there were even times when they would team up. One such example is in the episode Meet the Beatles, which was chock full of references to the Beatles in their musical catalog. There's even a character based on Yoko Ono, and I think it's one of the best episodes of the series. There were one-off villains too, like a clown who ends up losing his color and suddenly turns evil. Although I've long found the ending of that episode to be a little off, as the girls beat him up and throw him in prison, even though his terrible actions came from being infected by bleach rather than from his own control. There was a lot of charm in the show's retro vibe, with McCracken taking influence from classic superhero shows and kaiju movies when depicting the heroics the girls got into. Best of all, the Powerpuff Girls had endearing personalities, and it's great seeing how they played off both each other and their villains. McCracken and the writers also tried to give some variety in the storylines and how they were presented, like an episode where each girl gives a Rashomon-like explanation of the day's events to the mayor, or one where Mojo Jojo has taken over the role of the narrator. It's because of those reasons that the Powerpuff Girls remains one of my favorite Cartoon Network shows. Craig McCracken would turn his attention towards Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends following the show's 4th season, with Chris Savino becoming the new showrunner. Savino had previously supervised the remaining episodes of Dexter's Laboratory, so he seemed to be Cartoon Network's go-to person for taking over shows when the original creator decides to focus on other projects. Despite this, Savino did manage to retain the humor and appeal that McCracken brought to the show and closed the series off suitably well. The Powerpuff Girls was an enormous success, particularly in merchandising, which made Warner Brothers feel confident enough to greenlight a theatrical movie. This would tell the origin of the Powerpuff Girls and their first confrontation with Mojo Jojo, and McCracken saw it as an opportunity to prove the characters were not exclusively for young girls like the merchandise made it seem. He was even encouraged by the higher-ups at Cartoon Network to pitch it to an older crowd. The result is a surprisingly somber movie a lot of the time, with a much darker tone than the series. That's sort of my main issue with the movie, is it's kind of a downer, with the girls spending a lot of the story being depressed, the town hating them, and the professor trying to desperately show they're not dangerous. It's the Powerpuff Girls movie. Can you lighten up a little? There's even a big action sequence where their powers are first revealed to the citizens of Townsville, with them rushing through the city and causing all kinds of destruction on buildings and other properties. Keep in mind, this movie was released not long after the September 11th attacks, which made it difficult for some viewers not to feel uncomfortable during scenes like that. Lilo and Stitch and Men in Black 2 had to change certain scenes to avoid conjuring up those similarities, so it's interesting that the people on the production team looked at the Powerpuff Girls making holes in skyscrapers and went, yeah, it's fine. I think the best moments in the movie involve Mojo Jojo, who not only remains as funny as he is in the series, but comes up with quite a diabolical plan, although it backfires on him in the most hilarious way. Despite my criticisms, I don't mind this movie, as I do find it quite entertaining and inspiring in parts. I just think it went overboard with the tone, with even McCracken later saying he should have not made it so heavy. It's unfortunate the Powerpuff Girls movie flopped at the box office though, and it would have been nice to see Cartoon Network make more theatrical films. You might think the failure of the film would have put CN off from doing anything new with the girls, but they will continue to be flagship characters for the channel, with new episodes running until 2005 and continuous reruns. The show was popular around the world too, and one country where it found a significant audience was Japan, enough that an animated series was produced there titled Powerpuff Girls Z. McCracken was not involved much in the creation of the show, mainly helping out with the early development and then ultimately giving the team his permission to make it. I've watched a few episodes and they do a decent job of adapting Powerpuff Girls while giving it its own flavor. It's very much one of those hyperactive Japanese animated shows, but the humor retains that Powerpuff charm as we see the girls save people from Mojo Jojo and other villains. There was an energy to the episodes that worked well, and there was a clear understanding from the people involved what made the original show so entertaining, even with some of the changes made. Surprisingly, the show never aired on Cartoon Network in the United States, but an English language dub was produced and aired on the Boomerang Network in Australia, so dubs do exist out there and are not hard to find if you're interested in giving the series a look. To celebrate the 10th anniversary of the series, Craig McCracken directed a new special titled The Powerpuff Girls Rule. Serving as basically the finale, it brought back several of the villains and retained a lot of what made the original series so enjoyable. There's a particularly interesting arc for Mojo Jojo, and it served as a nice farewell to the characters. Well, at least with McCracken in charge. He would then turn to other projects after this, with Cartoon Network choosing to have other artists put their own spin on the Powerpuff Girls. The first production to be made without any involvement from McCracken at all was the special Dance Pants. I've only seen bits and pieces of this special, so I cannot comment on it as a whole. However, I do find the new art style interesting, and seems to show some creativity while also making clear this is a new iteration. I guess the special did well enough because a few months after it aired, Cartoon Network announced that a new Powerpuff Girls series was in the works. McCracken was vocal about him having zero involvement, and he'd even asked CN not to produce the new series. However, he also said that since they own the rights to the characters, they have the power to do whatever they want with them, even against his own wishes. I remember the hate the new series got since it originally aired in 2016, but I tended to chalk it up to people's love of the original series. After all, I've seen multiple cases of people disliking a new version of something because it was not like the thing they cherished in their childhood. Having now seen the series, though, my opinion did not end up that far from the general consensus, and I share other people's feelings that this new Powerpuff Girls was very underwhelming. Here's what I found most odd about it. While the original series had the girls as kindergartners, it was still pitched towards a general audience, as McCracken wanted it to appeal to anyone of any age. This new show ages up the Powerpuff Girls a bit, which makes sense as that allows for opportunities for new stories, but it seems to be targeted towards a younger audience. It pretty much becomes exactly the girly show that people who never watched the original Powerpuff Girls stereotyped it as. Maybe it was the batch of episodes I watched, but I felt it lacked the needed bite. One episode I watched had the girls fight a pillow. You might think, oh, an evil pillow with a malicious plot to destroy Townsville, and no, it's just a sentient pillow. I also never found myself laughing that much, as it placed a heavy emphasis on random LOL humor, and I usually found myself checking how much time was left. I thought the stories were that uninteresting. One of the more controversial decisions was not bringing back the original voice actresses to play the Powerpuff Girls. It's admittedly not unusual for new versions of animated series to go with different casts to stand on its own. The new DuckTales series comes to mind. What's bizarre here is that they brought the other voice actors back, so I don't blame Cavadini, Strong, and Daly for being annoyed. However, even looking at the 2016 series on its own, I just found the humor, action, and storytelling to be lacking that needed spark, despite the production team giving it their best shot. The Powerpuff Girls' personalities here was just them dealing with typical problems seen in school shows, and even their superheroics were not particularly interesting. Cartoon Network did have a lot of confidence in this new show, with these Powerpuff Girls even getting to cross over on Teen Titans Go, and it was certainly surreal hearing Raven make fun of the girls while with Tara Strong doing her voice and all. The show ran for 3 seasons before Cartoon Network quietly cancelled it. That would not be the final Powerpuff Girls project to receive negative attention, though. In 2020, it was announced that a new live-action show was being developed for the CW, with Diablo Cody and Heather Regnier writing the pilot script. Craig McCracken did admit he was curious about this new take, although he had no involvement with it. The Powerpuff Girls were going to be depicted in their 20s, and Chloe Bennett was cast as Blossom, Dove Cameron as Bubbles, and Yana Peralta as Buttercup. A pilot was filmed, but the CW decided the script needed some work before they would pick the series up. Eventually, they chose not to move forward with the series, but a few years later, a trailer of that unaired pilot leaked online, and it was something alright. Warner Brothers quickly got the trailer taken down, but this is the internet, so it's not that hard to find. The tone of the series, based on this short glimpse, seemed to go for something heavy on sarcasm, and there were other choices that seemed odd, like making Mojo Jojo a human. Of course, this was just a few minutes of footage, and you cannot really judge the quality of the potential series from just that, and it's entirely possible later scripts would have worked out any kinks. Nonetheless, I share a lot of people's views in not being that broken up that the show never made it past the pilot stage, and even McCracken would later reveal that he disagreed with the decision to make the girls into adults. However, for the first time in many years, he'll be directly involved in a new Powerpuff Girls animated series, although he has stressed it's still in development. And with the current state of Warner Brothers, it's hard to know what will happen with any project currently being conceived there. Regardless of what happens, it's remarkable what Craig McCracken accomplished with the original series, as he succeeded in creating 3 iconic superheroes who are able to stop the villains wrecking the town before bedtime. And so, once again, the day is saved thanks to the Powerpuff Girls. Powerpuff Girls were going to be depicted in their 20s, and Chloe Bennett was cast as Blossom, Dove Cameron as Bubbles, and Yana Peralta as Bubblecup. Bubblecup? That's not right. The Powerpuff Girls were going to be depicted in their 20s, and Chloe Bennett was cast as Blossom, Dove Cameron as Bubbles, and Yana Peralta as Bubblecup. No, I did it again.